Most players think discipline in football means waking up early, training hard, and following instructions. That's not discipline. That's obedience. Real discipline is what you do when no one is watching, when motivation disappears, when talent isn't enough, and when shortcuts feel tempting. Discipline is the invisible skill that separates players who look good from players who last. Today, I'm breaking down how to become extremely disciplined in football. Not emotionally, not motivationally, but structurally. If you apply this correctly, your game won't just improve. It will stabilize, sharpen, and survive pressure. Discipline in football is misunderstood by most players. Many think it means training harder than everyone else, waking up earlier, or forcing motivation on bad days. That version of discipline doesn't last. Real discipline in football is not emotional. It's structural. It's what you do automatically, without debate, regardless of mood, confidence, or circumstance. The first thing I had to understand was that discipline starts with identity. If I tell myself I'm trying to be disciplined, then discipline becomes optional. It depends on how I feel that day. But when I define myself as a disciplined footballer, my actions stop being negotiable. I don't wake up and ask whether I feel like preparing properly. I prepare because that's who I am. Identity removes friction. It turns effort into routine. Football is unpredictable on the pitch, but preparation cannot be chaotic. Disciplined players create structure away from the game so they can adapt inside it. That structure begins with daily habits. Sleep is not random. Nutrition is not emotional. Recovery is not optional. When these things are inconsistent, performance becomes unstable. Discipline is about stabilizing performance so that talent can show itself consistently. Another mistake players make is confusing discipline with suffering. Discipline is not punishment. It's alignment. It's choosing actions that support long-term performance instead of short-term comfort. Skipping recovery feels harmless today, but it accumulates fatigue over weeks. Arriving late once feels small, but it erodes standards over time. Discipline is understanding that football punishes small compromises repeatedly. Training discipline is also misunderstood. Many players believe discipline means pushing at maximum intensity every session. That leads to burnout and injuries. Real discipline is knowing when to push and when to control. It's following the plan even when ego wants to do more. Elite players respect periodization. They trust the process instead of chasing daily validation. Focus is a major part of discipline. Training sessions are not just physical, they are cognitive. Every drill has a purpose. If I mentally check out during simple exercises, I lose repetitions that build habits. Disciplined players treat basic drills seriously because simplicity is where consistency is created. Sloppy repetitions create sloppy performances. Emotional control separates disciplined players from talented ones. Football constantly attacks confidence. A bad touch, a missed chance, criticism from a coach, these moments test discipline more than any physical drill. Undisciplined players react emotionally. They force plays, argue, or disconnect. Disciplined players regulate themselves. They stay inside the game plan even when frustration rises. Discipline also means accepting boredom. Not every session feels exciting. Not every improvement feels visible. Many players quit mentally when progress slows. Disciplined players understand that growth in football is delayed. You train today for results you might see weeks or months later. Trusting that delay requires maturity. Honesty is another non-negotiable element. Discipline demands brutal self-awareness. I must know my weaknesses without protecting my ego. Avoiding weaknesses is comfortable, but comfort does not build players. Disciplined footballers attack weaknesses daily, even when it's frustrating, even when it exposes flaws. That discomfort is where development lives. Finally, Discipline is consistency under pressure. Anyone can be disciplined when things are going well. The real test is when confidence drops, when form dips, or when minutes are limited. Disciplined players do not abandon standards during these periods. They double down on structure. They keep routines intact because they understand that discipline is what carries them through instability. Discipline in football is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It looks boring from the outside. But over time, it compounds. It sharpens decision-making, stabilizes performance, and extends careers. Without discipline, talent fluctuates. With discipline, talent survives. Training discipline is where most footballers expose themselves. Not because they don't work hard, but because they work without structure. Effort alone is common. Precision is rare. Discipline in training is not about how tired I feel afterward. It's about how intentional every repetition is while I'm there. The first rule of training discipline is preparation. A session doesn't start when the whistle blows. It starts the night before. Sleep, hydration, nutrition, and mental readiness determine how much value I extract from training. Showing up tired, distracted, or underfueled is undisciplined because it wastes opportunity. I might still train, but I won't absorb the work. Disciplined players protect the quality of their preparation because they respect the value of every session. Once training begins, discipline becomes attention. Every drill has a purpose, even the ones that feel basic or repetitive. Passing patterns, rondos, positional drills, these are not fillers. They are environments designed to sharpen habits. When my mind drifts during simple drills, I'm teaching myself to be careless under pressure. Disciplined players treat simple actions with seriousness because matches are decided by simple actions executed correctly. Another major difference between disciplined and undisciplined players is self-correction. Undisciplined players wait for coaches to fix them. Disciplined players feel mistakes instantly. A poor body angle, a late scan, a rushed touch. I don't ignore it and move on. I register it, adjust, and apply the correction immediately. This requires awareness, not ego. The goal is not to look good in training, but to get better. Training discipline also means respecting the tempo of the session. Not every drill requires maximum intensity. Many players confuse discipline with constant aggression. That leads to sloppy execution, fatigue, and injury. Disciplined players understand when to slow the game down, when to increase speed, and when to conserve energy. They match the demand of the drill, not their emotions. Consistency matters more than standout days. An undisciplined player has great sessions followed by average ones. A disciplined player is reliably solid. Coaches trust reliability. Teams are built around players who deliver consistent performance, not occasional brilliance. Discipline turns training into a baseline, not a gamble. Another overlooked aspect of training discipline is role acceptance. Every player has a role within a team structure. When I ignore my role to chase moments, I undermine collective discipline. Elite players train within their tactical responsibilities. They refine movements, positioning, and decision-making that align with the team system. Individual improvement means nothing if it disrupts team balance. Recovery is part of training discipline, not separate from it. What I do after the session matters as much as what I do during it. Stretching, hydration, nutrition, sleep, these are extensions of training, not optional extras. Skipping recovery doesn't make me tougher. It makes me less available. Disciplined players protect their bodies because availability is a skill. Discipline also shows in how players respond to poor sessions. Undisciplined players spiral emotionally. They either overtrain to compensate or disengage mentally. Disciplined players analyze objectively. One bad session does not define identity. They correct errors and return to routine. Emotional stability is a competitive advantage. Finally, Training discipline requires patience. Improvement in football is delayed. I may train scanning for weeks before it appears naturally in matches. Undisciplined players quit early because results aren't immediate. Disciplined players trust accumulation. They understand that small gains compound quietly. Elite footballers are not separated by motivation. Everyone is motivated. They are separated by discipline, the ability to show up prepared, focus on details, correct themselves, respect structure, recover properly, and repeat the process without drama. Training discipline doesn't look exciting. It looks boring, controlled, and intentional. But over time, it builds players who can be trusted under pressure. And in football, trust is everything. Mental discipline is the difference between players who train well and players who perform well. Training happens in controlled environments. Matches do not. Games test emotional control, decision-making, and self-regulation in ways training never fully can. Without mental discipline, physical preparation collapses under pressure. The first thing I learned is that football constantly provokes emotional reactions. A bad touch, a misplaced pass, a missed chance, or a referee's decision can trigger frustration instantly. Undisciplined players react emotionally. They force actions, rush decisions, or mentally disconnect. Disciplined players respond instead of reacting. They acknowledge the moment and move on without emotional leakage. Emotional discipline starts with awareness. I must recognize when my emotions are rising before they control my actions. Anger, anxiety, or desperation all change how I play. They speed up decisions unnecessarily. They make me chase moments instead of reading the game. Discipline is catching myself early and returning to clarity. Decision-making under pressure is another core element. Football rarely gives perfect options. Most situations require compromise. Undisciplined players try to force perfect outcomes. Disciplined players choose the best available option quickly and accept the result. They understand that speed of decision is often more important than elegance. Confidence management is also part of mental discipline. Confidence in football fluctuates constantly. A few good actions can raise it. One mistake can damage it. Undisciplined players let confidence dictate effort. When confidence drops, performance follows. Disciplined players maintain standards regardless of confidence. They trust process over feeling. Discipline also means resisting ego. Football rewards humility more than players realize. Chasing highlight moments often leads to poor positioning, unnecessary risks, and tactical breakdowns. Disciplined players respect the game's rhythm. They choose efficiency over attention. Coaches notice this immediately. Handling mistakes separates professionals from amateurs. Every player makes errors. Undisciplined players dwell on them. They replay the mistake mentally, which removes focus from the next action. Disciplined players treat mistakes as information. They register it once and move on. The next action is always more important than the last one. Pressure situations reveal discipline clearly. Late minutes. Tight scores. Big matches. In these moments, emotions spike and decision-making slows. Undisciplined players play to avoid failure. Disciplined players continue executing fundamentals. They simplify their game instead of complicating it. Simple passes. Strong positioning. Clear communication. Mental discipline also involves patience. Football often requires waiting. Waiting for the right run. Waiting for space to open. Waiting for form to return. Undisciplined players rush these moments. They force action because waiting feels uncomfortable. Disciplined players understand timing. They trust the game to unfold. Another critical element is attention control. Matches are filled with distractions, crowd noise, opponents, referees, teammates. Disciplined players narrow focus to what matters. They listen selectively. They block external noise and stay locked into their role. This ability preserves energy and clarity. Self-talk plays a role here. The internal dialogue during matches affects performance. Negative self-talk drains confidence and increases tension. Disciplined players regulate their inner voice. They use short, task-focused cues instead of emotional judgments. Scan. Reset. Next action. These simple prompts anchor focus. Discipline also means accepting discomfort. Football is uncomfortable by nature. Fatigue, pressure, and uncertainty are constant. Undisciplined players fight discomfort emotionally. Disciplined players accept it as part of the job. Acceptance reduces resistance, which preserves energy. Leadership is closely tied to mental discipline. Even without the armband, disciplined players stabilize teams. Their reactions influence others. Calm spreads. Panic spreads faster. Mental discipline makes players reliable anchors in chaotic moments. Ultimately, mental discipline is about control. Not controlling the game, but controlling myself. When I can regulate emotions, decisions, focus, and ego, my performance becomes predictable in the best way. Talent without mental discipline fades under pressure. Talent with mental discipline survives, adapts, and performs when it matters most. Lifestyle discipline is the difference between players who peak briefly and players who last. Football careers are not destroyed by lack of talent. They are destroyed by inconsistency outside the pitch. What I do away from training either multiplies my effort or cancels it out completely. The first pillar of lifestyle discipline is recovery. Recovery is not passive. It is active preparation for the next performance. Sleep is the foundation. Without quality sleep, everything else degrades: reaction time, decision-making, mood, and injury resistance. Disciplined players protect sleep like training time. Late nights, unnecessary screen time, and poor routines are silent performance killers. Nutrition follows closely. Discipline in eating is not about restriction. It's about intention. Food is fuel, not reward. Undisciplined players eat emotionally, based on mood or convenience. Disciplined players eat functionally. They understand timing, balance, and consistency. One poor meal won't ruin performance, but repeated poor habits. That ownership creates independence. Extreme discipline in football is not about intensity. It's about sustainability. It's about building systems that hold up when motivation fades, confidence drops, or circumstances change. Discipline is what remains when everything else fluctuates. When lifestyle discipline is strong, training becomes more effective. When training discipline is strong, mental discipline holds under pressure. When mental discipline holds, performance stabilizes. Everything connects. Discipline is not glamorous. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. But it builds careers quietly and destroys excuses completely. If talent opens the door, discipline keeps it open. If you've listened to this entire video, you already understand something most footballers never fully grasp. Discipline isn't motivation. It isn't talent. It isn't intensity. Discipline is structure. It's what holds your game together when confidence drops, when progress slows, and when nobody is watching. Extremely disciplined footballers don't rely on feeling ready. They rely on systems. They prepare the same way. They train with intention. They control emotions under pressure. They protect their bodies, their focus, and their time. Over years, that consistency separates players who flash briefly from players who last. If this video helped you see discipline differently, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Every week, I break down football from a tactical, mental, and professional perspective, the kind most players never get taught. I also want to hear from you. Shape future videos. Football doesn't reward talent alone. It rewards discipline that survives pressure. If you build that, everything else becomes easier.